Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Stogie Review video review. I am Walt, and back once again to do a weekly cigar review. And unlike the short ashes segment, which you may have seen last week, this review is going to be a little longer and a little more in-depth if you're not familiar with the review process here on Stogie Review. Now, 2 weeks ago I told you I was going to review the Los Blancos Premier Connecticut, I believe. Due to the holiday, some things got jumbled around, and I didn't get a chance to smoke it, which is why you saw the short ashes segment. And I told you I'd follow up the week after that with an Isla de Cuba cigar, and actually I'm sort of staying on schedule as far as that goes. I'm just going to have to sort of leapfrog and do the Los Blancos next week. But I have the Wango Tango from Isla de Cuba Cigars, which is made by Darryl Leeser. Check that again. Anyway, well, Darryl just recently released these cigars at this year's IPCPR trade show in Las Vegas. These are designed to be a little more fun than your traditional cigar, or at least the traditional lines that he currently has, which are the Aged Maduro, I think it's a Classic, and the Blend 376. Now, actually, before I get into telling you about the cigar, I want to go over the characteristics of it so that I'm not taking so long to do this introduction part. First and foremost, the wrapper of the cigar looks a bit rough, and there's actually a lot of light-colored little dots at the head of the cigar, which is what appears to be tooth in the wrapper. They're like raised little bumps that have had the color knocked off of them, sort of like if you painted something and then you sort of went over the latex paint with sandpaper, you'll sort of knock the color off of the high spots. You get the same thing with the wrapper, and it's just up at the head. The physical seam, the spiral around the cigar, looks a little loose at spots. It's lifting a little. It is a Connecticut broadleaf wrapper, so it does have a little bit more of a rustic appearance to it naturally. So a lot of that is what you're seeing shine through in the cigar. The veins are fairly small. They're inobtrusive. They're not really raised. I'm not getting much of a lumpy feel to it as I handle the cigar. It looks a little dry, but aside from that, it doesn't look bad. Now, there's actually a little bit of a hollow spot in the center of the cigar there. Looks like it was the way it may have been pressed. And there's a fair amount of soft spots throughout the cigar. Now, all the other Isla de Cuba cigars that I've had so far have had a pretty firm draw, and they last for a very long time. I'm kind of hoping that this little bit of softness that I feel means that the draw will be a little bit more free. I'll get a little more smoke, and the cigar will progress faster. The other cigars just took forever to smoke because of how densely packed they were. As you can see, it's got a perfecto foot, little nipple on the end. It seems to be formed well. It's firm. No defects or anything like that I can see. So with that said, I'm going to go right ahead and get into cutting my cigar and lighting it as I tell you a little bit about the brand. Now, as I had mentioned, these cigars were released this year at IPCPR in Vegas. Now, they come in boxes of 24, and they're available in what look like 4 sizes. And again, to go along with that Wango Tango name, they have sort of fun sizes as well. They've got a Quickie, which is 4.5 by 60, a Slicky, which is 50 by 5.5, a Biggie, which is 54 by 6.5, and a Longie, which is 38 by 7. And because they're perfectos, that larger part of the ring gauge is going to be the bulge. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be 60 head to toe, or head to foot. Okay, both the wrapper and binder are Connecticut broadleaf. It doesn't say, well, Connecticut broadleaf, duh. At any rate, that about does it for the cigar. I'm not seeing any information on the filler. Just read a little bit more. I'm not seeing anything on the filler, so that I'll have to look into a little bit more. The small nipple foot on this should make it very easy to light. Draw is extremely hard. I'm getting very little smoke. It feels like I can sort of feel the foot widening as I draw on the cigar. So hopefully within a few more puffs everything will be opened up and I'll be able to get some flavor out of the smoke that seems a bit too light to really taste anything at this point. So sit tight, I'll be back and get started on the first third of the Wango Tango by Isla, Cuba.
Holiday quiet on these streets, except for some stubborn leaves that didn't fall with the fall, and now they clatter in vain. Holiday sky, midnight clear, wind is high, hard to steer. Old muffler.
Well, welcome back. I've been at my Wango Tango for about a half an hour now, and as you can see, burn line is a little off. But it seems to be very under control. It's thin, very crisp, a little wavy, but again, not something I'd be overly concerned about. The ash, on the other hand, is becoming a little bit of an annoyance. As the ash burns, it has this very light color to it, and as you look closer, you can see sort of like distinct stacking, or just the way the ashes form. You can see that there's clumps and groupings all throughout, this solid piece of ash. And as I'm handling the cigar, these pieces are breaking off, and it doesn't take much for these things to fall off and flake. And when you go to clean up this ash, it feels very powdery and soft, as opposed to this heavy, sandy sort of ash that I'm accustomed to with a lot of other cigars. So while it really doesn't make a bit of difference in how the cigar smokes or how the cigar tastes, it was just one of those interesting things that I thought I'd make note of, was that the ash is a little bit different than I'm accustomed to. After probably 4 or 5 puffs, I could literally feel the draw opening up as I burned through that small nipple on the end. Once that happened, I was able to pick up, loads of smoke and enjoyable flavor. With that more dense supply of smoke, I was able to pick up medium body and a finish that was middle of the road. Wasn't dry, wasn't creamy, and the flavors are kind of interesting. While I was in Vegas for IPCPR, Brian and it was probably the day before last, we finally made our way back around the Pepin area, back in the back left-hand corner of the convention center. And back there, they were giving away Scotch samples, and I happened to take this sample of Lafroig, which I had never had before, and I didn't like it. It was explained to me as being a very peaty Scotch, and that peatiness is what I disliked about that Scotch. I'm getting a very similar, almost peaty flavor out of the cigar, only it's much more subdued. It's not as in your face. It's much more enjoyable in the cigar than it was in the Scotch. Obviously, I ended up tossing about half the sample, which wasn't very big to begin with. But there's some interesting flavor in the cigar that I haven't picked up in anything else. That was the first time I ever noticed a peaty flavor in a cigar, and it was very distinct. Sort of lingers in the background, doesn't last very long. The primary flavor I'm getting out of it is a mixture of spice and pepper. And I can feel the spice and pepper on the tip of my tongue, and it really shines when you pass the smoke through your sinuses or retrohale. Neither one of those flavors are too over the top, because you know, a lot of times when a cigar is, you know, just too peppery or too spicy, it's really a big turnoff, at least for me anyway, and it seems to be kind of balanced. So all in all, I'm enjoying the cigar so far. Burn line's a little wavy. The ash is a little bit of an annoyance with it flaking everywhere. The volume of smoke is good now that I'm past that initial perfecto shape. Resting smoke is fairly light as I'm just looking at it now. And smoke supply is good. It's easy to draw at this point. And the smoke rate, which I'm keeping an eye on, it's almost 40 minutes now, or all but. And it seems about right. The other cigars produced by Cuba, they just lasted a very long time, and I was really hoping I wasn't going to get a cigar that was going to last me 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, and feel like it was lasting me, you know, 2.5, 3 hours. I don't mind if the cigar lasts that long, but I don't want to feel as though the cigar is being dragged out. And this one, I'm not getting that impression. So, so far so good. Sit tight. I'll be back. We'll jump right into the second, third, and see how the Wango Tango develops. Well, welcome back. It's been about an hour now, and as you can see, that a little bit of a wavy burn has corrected itself for the most part. It's fairly straight. Burn line is still thin and crisp. The ash is still very powdery and flaky, and you know, it's not like big chunks are falling off the cigar. They're just, you know, they're big enough to make a mess. Resting smoke is still fairly light. The smoke rate, it's, even though the cigar seems to be taking me quite some time, it seems to be more relaxed than the other Isla de Cuba products, which took much longer. Now, it seems kind of strange, you know, the faster cigar feeling more relaxed, but the other cigars had a firmer draw, and as a result, it really felt like I was smoking a cigar for every minute. You know, every minute of that 2-3 hours, I felt like I was working on that cigar. This one, it just seems a little more laid back, a little more enjoyable, and it's a decent smoke nonetheless. In the body department, I've seen a gradual progression, and it's not quite medium to full yet, but it's almost there. The finish is gravitating a little more towards dry rather than creamy. I'm getting a little bit of a parched feeling way back in my throat, and the flavor is interesting to say the least. Much like the name, which is kind of out of the ordinary, the flavor combination now is kind of strange as well. This peaty flavor that I was getting earlier on through the sinuses has changed. It's become like a savory flavor. It's just kind of strange to get such a savory flavor out of a cigar. And the pepper and spice that were the predominant flavors, you know, across the palate, have become much sweeter, and I'm getting leather flavors as well. So there's just some, I don't know, a flavor combination that I would never expect to see kind of intermixing with one another, and it's interesting, and it's not a chore to smoke. It's not an odd combination of flavors across the palate. It's not bad. It's an enjoyable smoke, even though I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around all the flavor combinations that are going on. It's easy to smoke, and it's not offensive. Also, in terms of offensive, the smoke seems to be sticking to me pretty well. I've got I've got a small filter going behind the camera, which you could probably hear a little bit, and it does a pretty good job of getting a lot of the smoke out of the air. I just happened to leave the room and walk past my wife, and she made a comment about how bad the cigar smoke smelled on me. So it seems to be sticking to my clothes a little bit, sort of marinating in my own smoke. It doesn't smell bad. So I'm enjoying the cigar. Flavors are strange but good. Good burning characteristics with the exception of the flaky ash. And it's smoking well in terms of just smoking it. And so with that said, I'm going to take a quick break. You're going to see a couple more pictures, maybe a little music from PodSafe Music Network, and I'll be back. I'll do the final third, wrap up this review, and let you be on your way. Well, welcome back. I'm getting down to the last part of my Wango Tango by Isla, Cuba. And it's been just under 90 minutes now, an hour and a half. And cigar's going well. I'm still getting lots of smoke with each and every puff. The smoke rate, you know, comparing it to other cigars of this size, it might be a little fast, but it just, I don't know, the time just breezed by. It felt like a relaxed, easygoing cigar. Ash is still a little flaky. I'm still getting lots of little pieces floating off of the cigar. Burn line is thin and crisp. A little wavy, but it's well within that 3/8 of an inch that I've mentioned many times before being my rule of thumb as far as an acceptable variation in burn. Downside of the cigar now is it's beginning to get warm. Warm both on the fingers and across the palate. As a result, I'm taking a puff about, I don't know, I'm leaving a gap about twice as long as I usually do in between puffs. So the cigar has adequate time to cool. As far as the body is concerned, there's been a little bit of progression. It's now what I would consider medium to full. Finish is pretty much the same. It's still dry. I'm getting a parched feeling in the back of the throat. And as far as the flavors are concerned, it's made another transition, but not as dramatic as the other was. The sweetness is dying down. The leather flavor is coming forward. It's more predominant. The savory flavor that I was getting before is transitioning back to that peaty flavor that I was enjoying. But it's tough to discern all this stuff because the cigar is getting so warm that when I puff on it, even in letting it cool for some time, it comes across the palate as harsh. So I think I've extended this cigar a little longer than I should have let it go for. Obviously I should be putting it out any minute now, just because the flavors are being just washed out by this harshness from the heat of the cigar. All in all, I think it was a decent smoke. It was definitely different. I've smoked a couple of these. This might be my third or fourth, and all of them struck me as strange, or not strange, but different. If different is what Isla Cuba was going for here, you know, I think they hit the mark. It is different. It's something that I haven't smoked before. It's got some interesting flavors, especially the peaty flavor, and that transition to a savory flavor was kind of odd, but it was interesting at the same time. It wasn't, I don't know, there wasn't like a big conflict of flavors that just sort of made you scrunch your nose up at it and go, you know, what is going on here? It's not bad. It's a decent smoke all in all. Aside from the flaky ash, I think it was constructed well. I got good volume of smoke. It was dense, flavorful. The body suited the flavor profile well. The finish, I could have gone for a creamier smoke rather than a drier smoke, which I don't normally prefer anyway. But all in all, it was a decent smoke. Now, the downside to these cigars, which this is the part of the Isla de Cuba line that I struggle with. Now, from what I understand, these are all made by Altadis. Altadis makes just tons of different cigars. They are one of the big boys in the market. And the price point on these is between, it's like $6 and $7, $7.25 or something like that. And just glancing back real quick, between $5.95 and $7.25, range between the four cigars. And when you have a cigar that's got an odd name, obviously it's going to catch people's eye. It certainly would catch my eye if I was walking through my local shop's humidor. But being, I don't want to say, you know, the new kid on the block, because, you know, obviously they're not brand new or anything, but, you know, when I see a cigar that I have never seen before and I haven't really heard about, you know, and I see that $7.25 price point, well, obviously for the bigger cigar, but you know, I struggle with picking that up over something that's more budget friendly, that has a more widespread name, just for whatever reason. I guess it's just a name recognition that's kicking in. This is a cigar that I would, if I were to look at it and guess the price, I would guess much lower, $4.55. You know, maybe, I don't know, maybe $6 something for, you know, the larger of the sizes. And while that may not seem much, like $6 something versus $7 something, it's I don't know, that dollar makes a big difference as far as I'm concerned when I'm standing there selecting a cigar to purchase. So I think that's a big hurdle that the consumer needs to get over in order to try the cigar, and I think that's the part that Isla de Cuba might be struggling with at this point, is they need to get people to get over that hurdle and try the cigar, and you know, once they get over that hurdle, they may enjoy it and begin purchasing more of them. But it's that initial, I guess, sticker shock that I get looking at these cigars, especially not knowing much about them, and then hearing that, you know, they're being made by Altadis. It's, I don't know, Altadis and high-priced cigars are, I don't know, I struggle with that concept, just because I think mass market, lower-priced cigars, it's not always the case, but, you know, in my mind, you know, I get this notion locked in my head, and I struggle with it. And this is a prime example where I would struggle with buying a cigar simply because of the price point, and not knowing too much about it, and then maybe reading it was an Altadis product. You know, that would I don't know, it'd definitely be a speed bump. I don't know that I would not purchase it, but it's definitely a hurdle to get over initially. All in all, I think it was a decent cigar. If you wouldn't mind paying between $5.95 and $7.25 to try one, I'd recommend picking one up. Just keep in mind that $5.95 to $7.25 is before state taxes, so in Pennsylvania that price would be right on the money. Go to a state like California where they have an astronomical state tax, you're obviously going to pay much more for this cigar. But again, you'd be comparing it to cigars that also have that large tax attributed to it. So there you have it, the Wango Tango by Isla de Cuba. As I mentioned, I'm going to try to get the Los Blancos Premier Connecticut done next week. After that, I've got several cigars that I should have gotten done weeks ago, but you know, things coming up and whatnot. So keep an eye out on Twitter. If you're using the service Twitter, it's Walt W, and follow that person, which is me, and that's sort of your avenue for where I'm going as far as what cigars I'm reviewing or what cigars I'm working on and whatnot. I just sort of jot down random thoughts in there, and anyway, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see all the different directions that I'm being pulled in, and struggle with on a day-to-day basis. So with that said, until next week, happy smoking.